Hi, Professor Leground. My name's Warner Shekin, and this is my optional kind of add-on that I wanted to do to my final exam, as I was able to already watch the video that Adichie made and was able to get a sense of what the power of one story really meant, and you know, how it can be so influential in how we interpret people and how the outputs can look, especially from like a historical aspect where, you know, we're looking at a lot of these religions and we're basing it a lot on their, you know, you can look at the writing, but a lot of how that writing's interpreted comes down to the history, and the history comes down to that, you know, kind of final verdict we create in our head. And then I wanted to contrast it a little bit to a book I recently read, which is a little dissimilar. It's called Another World, Bermuda and the Rise of Modern Tourism, and it focuses specifically on a man who lived his entire life in Ottawa and dedicated his life to kind of scholarship and research when it comes to homogeneity of modern tourism and how, you know, these countries go down and they remove a lot of the cultural aspects, whether it be religion, behavior, remove even like vehicles, things like that. But starting with the story, and what I really wanted to get to was this story explores the premise of, you know, a lot of people that live in Bermuda, you know, understand that there's two perspectives, and Bermuda actually kind of became the first place to pioneer the art of like resort island tourism, but it kind of reflects the same thing that Adichie experienced. So moving to the US for college at 19 was really inspirational to hear about, but then her initial experience with her American roommate was just super poor, because again, this one story that was prevailed and projected onto her where, you know, her roommate's asking, oh, do you speak English well? Meanwhile, you know, Nigeria is historically a British colony and they speak like fluent English. I'm pretty sure that is like the official language of Nigeria as well, and that's what she mentioned. And I think at one point she mentioned that her roommate even asked her like play her type of music, and she handed her like a Mariah Carey tape. And then moving forward, even like didn't think that Adichie would even know how to use a stove, and that comes to the point of underestimating someone, homogenizing their entire being into one aspect. And I think when it comes to history, we can really have a lot of homogenized thought when we're approaching a lot of the interpretation of literature. And being able to kind of move this forward, the power of a single story is not about who someone is or what they do, but making your version the accepted version. A lot of the times when we're talking about power, reclamation, through various like religious triumphs, you're seeing that the power they're ascertaining is getting the final verdict and getting the final like interpretation that leads to like a societal acceptance of who they are and what they are, irregardless of what they've done, and that just really was toxic. And then Adichie kind of branches this off into the idea of starting with secondly, and that is how you start a story defines its verdict, not really kind of factoring in any other facts. So, you know, you can have the identical situation, but how you interpret it at the end is that raw output, and that's what people care about. So, you have that idea of Native Americans or indigenous people attack settlers, right? They're going to use like derogatory-ish language that may not be used. The idea that, oh, well, they just like, attacked them, versus, you know, European settlers arrived on land that was previously owned, lived on, everything like that, and took land that wasn't theirs through violence, introduced ailment, and then years of generational trauma kind of built up. Same history, but kind of an opposing villain, even though the story is the exact same. So Adichie kind of built on this and just said, starting with secondly, building on this idea that there's always a whole story to be interpreted. There's the facts, there's a secondary insight, and you can kind of build on this through both like physical media, you know, things like books. Like the writer of this, Duncan McDowell, he really touches on the fact that he visited Bermuda, and he kind of illustrates a lot of it in his drawing where he branches Bermuda to Toronto, which is really funny. And, you know, I think just moving to Toronto myself, that is something that I can really relate to, and understanding that a lot of what we tend to forget is that these are lived people with lived experiences, lived communities. And I really like this book. It's mainly focused on just pure writing, but it does include that idea of, you know, being able to see various aspects of culture being kind of misinterpreted based on just one like solo fact. So kind of moving forward into the course itself and the idea of world religions, even the word Hindu wasn't actually coined by Hindus. I know that throughout the course this was a big focus on what I wrote in my critical reflections, but again, it was originally a Persian word for people living near the Indus River. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but again, it was just a geographical focused term of people who live near a certain lake, and it wasn't religious at all. Like, it was purely geographical. And then British colonial administrators fully later needed one label for any quote-unquote Indian who wasn't already Muslim or Christian, and shoved them into that one box. So that geographical term was repurposed as a religious category that became a defining aspect for so many people. And the problem is that kind of the people under that label don't even agree on the basics, right? So we kind of build a whole idea of what like Hindu means, or what, you know, this certain religion means. But a lot of the people, like Western versus like the global world, a lot of times I come with an incorrect perspective, or I lack so much information. A lot of it is generalization. So we see like whether scripture is even divine revelation, whether God exists. A lot of religions don't necessarily believe the same way that we do in the Western world, and I think that's a perfect example of how we can summarize one story without looking at the full picture. And it's a label built for, you know, traditionally a colonizer's convenience, not the people's self-understanding and understanding from an outside perspective, and again, that control being held over who gets the final word. So I'm going to build on this with the idea of the Masuzawa as, you know, world religions as a category. So the idea of world religions itself, you know, the standard list of like approximately 8 major religions every course teaches, isn't necessarily neutral. It was invented by, you know, 19th century European settlers. This book takes place in the 20th century, but it kind of gets to build on a lot of what I'm talking about here, and is that they decided which cultures were advanced, quote unquote, enough to have a real religion and be considered. So again, this is a story of interpreted quantity and prevalence and power, which again comes down to history and the impact that is kind of ascertained and allocated. And traditions that didn't make the cut got labeled, you know, folklore, or, you know, just a custom or a primitive belief of, again, that reversal culture where, you know, instead of it being religion, it's just a geographical area. And I think when it comes down to this, Miller and Kelleher within the text focused on Taoism and Confucianism, and both of them even are unsure on whether or not they count as religion, because scholars have spent years like dedicating their time to figuring this out. But again, these traditions don't fit that Western template of, oh, like, do you have a personal God? Do you believe in sin? Is there a vice to your, like, kind of, or a vice to your sin, to your divine revelation? And do you have a salvation at the end of the path? And again, that differs. And if you don't meet that criteria, a lot of these religions may not be considered major enough to even be brought up, even though they're in areas with the largest population per capita. And then even moving forward, Gethin and Strong were 2 researchers that I know we really looked at in the text, specifically on the field of Buddhism, and being able to see that, you know, Gethin kind of had that belief that Buddha said his teaching can't just be handed to you as a fact. You have to listen to it, sit with it, process it, but also practice it for it to mean anything. You can't just preach and not live the truth that you tell people you want to live. And then Strong had that chariot dialogue between the monk and the king, and it was, you know, I arrived by chariot, and then a monk kind of follows with like a focus on like the frame, the axle, the wheel, and kind of breaks down what the king is saying, because we fail to realize how much goes into everything that we consume. And I think especially in this book, a big part of it is not understanding that, you know, contributing to the world of global tourism, you're contributing to people who are underpaid, slavery, youth employment that is illegal and usually abusive. And then kind of moving through this, I kind of wanted to bring in my own like Cree kinship a little bit. So a real academic paper by 2 Indigenous scholars called Wildcat and Voth on Wakatano Owen is a local community kind of near where a lot of my family is from, and it means kinship, but functions more like the law than sentiment around it. So it governs how people treat each other, the land, and the community. And I think one of the core things I wanted to take was that it's not vague, it's not infinite, it is simply be nice to everyone forever. And this approach was something where we left interpretation out of it. It's simply you live it, you be it, without the kind of establishment of generalizing an entire group of people or minimizing someone's experience. Just being able to kind of, again, shift more towards the Western kind of perspective when there's so much more to it. And I think the main thing I want to take away from this and through this video is that there's a lot more to every religion that we looked at. I've only focused really on kind of some of the smaller ones that I don't think were spotlighted enough throughout the course content. However, I really go into depth within my actual final exam. And I hope that this kind of passes along with that idea of, I hope that additional research and a lot of contrast and comparisons can really stand to showcase how much growth we can get from kind of getting that second story and saying, you know, what Aditi said is be secondly with everything we do. And that means research, that means understanding, that means curiosity and leading with passion. And I hope that that really branches off into what I was hoping to emulate and showcase throughout this video. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity to submit this alongside my final exam, Professor Legrone. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your day.